Hey internet friends, who do you reckon is the biggest loser of 2020? If you were to ask me, I'd say small business. Over the last 6 months, it was reported that a total of 164,000 businesses in the US had to shut their doors during lockdown. And almost 100,000 of those businesses have no plans of reopening. Over the summer, the US lost almost 22 million jobs across low-income areas. Overall, small business revenue is down 20% in 2020, hitting tourism, hospitality, and restaurants the hardest. And the number of lower to middle class workers not at work has quadrupled since the beginning of the year. Even teenagers cut back on their purchases across food, clothing, travel, and music, hitting a 40-year low on spending simply because part-time jobs just weren't there. The events of 2020 caused millions of Americans to dip into their emergency reserves, which are expected to be totally depleted by the year's end, with 3 out of 5 Americans reporting that their rainy day fund has almost already run dry. And while millions of Americans lost their livelihood in 2020, the rich only got richer. In fact, during lockdown, billionaires' wallets got fatter in pretty much every sector. Technology, healthcare, you name it. During lockdown, billionaire wealth rose to $10.2 trillion for the first time in history. Your typical Mockingbird media outlets attributed this trend to billionaires being able to take on more financial risks, because they were able to buy more company shares during times of uncertainty, and the MSM uses this narrative to boost the idea that capitalism is failing the United States. But anyone with a pulse remembers that mom-and-pop shops were forced to limit their exposure to the public, often being pressured to shut their doors during the lockdown. While Jeff Bezos' Amazon has benefited from the pandemic more than any other retailer, because the government decided Amazon facilities were essential and sold essential items. Meanwhile, the mom-and-pop hardware store down the road, they had to close, because the logic here is that germs don't live on cardboard Amazon boxes. So when you can't go into town for what you need, there's obviously an increased demand for e-commerce. That's why Bezos' wealth grew in dollars more than any other billionaire. And with this example, it's easy to see how a controlled demolition of small business took place. And yeah, I'm using Amazon as the main example here because nearly everyone has used their services or they're at least familiar with it. Amazon is a particularly good example since CEO Jeff Bezos purchased the Washington Post back in 2013. Because propaganda mouthpieces are particularly useful in enforcing whatever message benefits those who own them. It's not really fair for legacy media to claim that capitalism is failing us because it's actually our government that has been and is failing us. Because the government is the one who forced small businesses to bend to their will, while boosting monopolies during the lockdown. Government-enforced monopolies aren't really the same as free market unadulterated capitalism, are they? And these billionaire boogeymen that the MSM props up for the mob to descend upon? Well, let's be honest, they're there for you to focus on by design. There are billionaires and trillionaires whose names have never hit headlines because back in 1913, the Federal Reserve Act was passed, handing over America's gold and silver reserves and ultimately the total control of America's economy to the Federal Reserve Bank. A private corporation established their private bank, acting as the central bank of the United States, but isn't even a government institution, but a privately owned banking system. So basically, in 1913, a criminal cartel took control of a nation's monetary system. Respective families of this cartel bought and built media outlets as well as purchased politicians to push us into World War I. Both sides of every war were and are funded by the same banks. Since then, this parasite has infiltrated nations, governments, and economies across the world. After all, a one-world government means one central global bank. This year, the only other agenda that the media outlets have pushed as hard as the morality play of lockdowns have been race wars. Businesses owned by every color of person across the United States boarded up their storefronts in preparation for what the media described as mostly peaceful protests. Over uninvestigated incidents with limited details, the full story or even unedited video footage nowhere in sight, with the media's default of trial by mob rule, meaning guilty until proven innocent. The outrage machine has no time for logic, reason, or even the justice system. Only feelings and accusations. And this is where I want to talk about the next phase of assault on small business, only this time it's sponsored by Yelp. If you don't know what Yelp is, they're a review website that aims to connect individuals with local business. With 178 million unique visitors monthly, Yelp is a popular service with questionable ethical practices that shows users how local businesses rank with their nearby competitors. There have been allegations that Yelp has made business owners pay to get negative reviews removed from their page, which sounds a whole lot like extortion, but okay, so anyway. Yelp recently announced its contribution to the social justice movement by introducing a feature called Businesses Accused of Racist Behavior Alert to any business page where a company had been accused of racism. Yes, accused. I said accused because that's all it really takes is just an accusation. Because the year is 1692 and we're knee-deep in the Salem witch trials, but actually it's 2020 and all someone has to say to kill your livelihood is that you're racist. No proof needed, really. If you don't like somebody and they're a business owner, just go on Yelp and call them a racist and watch their income take a hit. Yelp elaborated a little bit, saying, "Now, when a business gains public attention for reports of racist conduct, such as using racist language or symbols, Yelp will place a new business accused of racist behavior alert on their Yelp page to inform users, along with a link to a news article where they can learn more about the incident." Well, great, they'll be citing the reliable mainstream media who always gets it right and is never biased, as justification for burning down your business. They've really stuck to the problem, reaction, solution formula, saying that this feature was created because of a major influx of complaints regarding racism that occurred in 2020. Yelp said, "So far in 2020, we've seen a 133% increase in the number of media-fueled incidences on Yelp compared to the same time last year. Between May and September, we placed more than 450 alerts on business pages that were either accused of or the target of racist behavior related to the Black Lives Matter movement." 1913 was a defining year for the United States, but I'd go as far as to say that 2020 is even more important, as we're all watching the greatest transfer of wealth in history take place while being told to stay inside to stop the spread. There is only one attitude, one line of thinking that is acceptable on this lockdown, which has been enforced by the media who just happens to be owned by the folks who are benefiting from the demolition of small business. The absurdity is demonstrated by the fact that if I made a video wherein the premise was to hug your family next time you see them, well, I'd most likely be labeled a domestic terrorist and my dangerous content would get yanked off the internet. So I didn't make a video about that, but what I covered here in this video is the all-out assault on working class individuals. A bunch of people who were just minding their own business trying to make the best of this life they were given and provide for their families. It's a classic tale of the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. All while the media pits us against each other and the overall frustration is channeled into the mob mentality, resulting in killing, looting, burning, and targeted harassment of the rival mob. Meanwhile, the folks who are actually orchestrating the whole thing get away with it.